I almost stood up and walked out before she reached the table. Every eye in the restaurant followed the woman covered in dried mud from head to toe, her shoes soaked, her hair tangled by the wind, and tiny scratches marking her hands as if she had crawled through the earth itself. I felt embarrassed, confused, and more than a little angry. Then she looked directly into my eyes and quietly said the one sentence that shattered every assumption I had made: "I'm late because I stopped to save a little boy's life." Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. There are moments that divide your life into two parts: the person you were before and the person you become afterward. For me, that moment began on a bright Saturday afternoon when I agreed to go on a blind date I never wanted. My younger sister, Naomi, had insisted for months that I needed to stop hiding behind work. After losing my fiancé 3 years earlier to a drunk driver, I had buried myself inside my architecture firm. Blueprints replaced conversations. Meetings replaced friendships. Empty evenings became normal. Naomi finally reached her limit and announced she had found someone who understood heartbreak just as deeply as I did. She refused to tell me anything except that her name was Alara and that she believed people deserved second chances. I reluctantly agreed, mostly because saying no to Naomi had become impossible. The restaurant overlooked a peaceful river lined with maple trees. Sunlight danced across the water while families laughed along the walking paths. Everything looked too perfect for someone carrying as much invisible weight as I was. I arrived early, ordered coffee, and checked my watch every few minutes. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. My irritation slowly grew into disappointment. Maybe she had changed her mind. Honestly, I almost hoped she had. Then the restaurant door opened. Conversations slowed. A waitress nearly dropped a tray. People turned to stare. The woman standing there looked nothing like anyone arriving for a first date. Mud covered her jeans almost to her knees. Her light jacket was stained brown. Her hair was tangled with leaves. One sleeve had been torn open near the shoulder. She looked exhausted, breathing heavily as though she had run for miles. Every instinct told me this meeting was a disaster. I grabbed my wallet, preparing to leave before she noticed me. But she did notice. She walked straight toward my table despite the curious looks surrounding her. Her eyes held embarrassment, but something stronger lived behind them, a quiet determination that refused to apologize for existing. Then she spoke. She said she was late because she had stopped to save a little boy's life. The words froze me. She slowly explained that while driving to the restaurant she had seen a child chasing his dog into a muddy drainage canal beside a construction site. Recent rain had turned the ground into thick clay. The little boy slipped, became trapped, and began sinking deeper every second. Adults gathered nearby were too afraid to climb down because the ground kept collapsing beneath them. Without thinking, she had jumped into the mud herself. It had taken nearly 30 minutes to pull the terrified child free while others called emergency services. She wasn't making excuses. Her trembling hands, torn sleeve, and fresh scratches told the story far better than words ever could. Just as she finished speaking, her phone buzzed. She smiled weakly after reading the message. The boy's mother had sent a photo from the hospital. Her son was safe. For the first time in years, I felt ashamed of how quickly I had judged another human being. Instead of leaving, I asked whether she wanted water before anything else. She laughed softly and admitted she'd probably scared half the restaurant. That laugh carried no bitterness. Only relief. As lunch continued, I discovered someone unlike anyone I had ever met. Alara worked as a physical therapist for children recovering from serious injuries. She wasn't wealthy. She didn't have a glamorous lifestyle. She simply believed every child deserved someone who refused to give up on them. She admitted that helping others often complicated her own life because she rarely ignored someone in trouble. Friends teased her for attracting chaos everywhere she went. Looking at the dried mud still clinging to her sleeves, I believed every word. Hours disappeared unnoticed. Instead of discussing careers or favorite movies, we talked about grief, loneliness, forgiveness, and the strange ways pain changes people. I confessed that after losing my fiancée, I had stopped believing happiness could return without betraying the past. Ilara listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she quietly said that love never asks us to replace someone we lost. It simply teaches us our hearts can grow larger than our sorrow. No therapist had ever explained grief that clearly. Something inside me shifted. Over the following weeks we continued seeing each other. Our dates rarely followed plans. One afternoon she convinced me to help repaint an old community center instead of watching a movie. Another weekend we delivered meals to elderly neighbors she'd known for years. She somehow found joy inside ordinary acts of kindness. Being around her reminded me that life wasn't measured by promotions or expensive dinners. It was measured by the people whose burdens became lighter because we existed. For the first time in years, I started smiling without forcing it. Naomi noticed first. She said I laughed differently now. I hadn't realized I'd forgotten how. But happiness has a strange way of attracting unfinished chapters. Nearly 4 months after our first meeting, everything changed. We attended a neighborhood fundraiser held in a city park under bright afternoon skies. Families gathered around food stands while children played games across the grass. During the event, an elegant woman approached us wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying herself with unmistakable confidence. The moment Ilara saw her, all color disappeared from her face. The woman introduced herself as Vanessa. She smiled politely at me. Then she looked directly at Ilara and asked whether she was still pretending to be everyone's hero. The atmosphere instantly turned cold. I sensed years of history hiding beneath those few words. Ilara quietly suggested we leave. During the drive home she barely spoke. Finally, she admitted Vanessa had once been her closest friend. Years earlier they had volunteered together at a children's rehabilitation center. Then one terrible afternoon a young patient disappeared during an outdoor therapy session. Vanessa blamed Ilara. Rumors spread. Parents demanded answers. Although investigators eventually discovered the child had wandered away and been found unharmed less than an hour later, the accusations permanently damaged Ilara's reputation. Many people never learned the full truth. Some chose not to believe it. She transferred hospitals and rebuilt her career elsewhere. But the shame never fully disappeared. I wanted to comfort her. Instead, another surprise arrived before I understood how complicated the past really was. A week later an anonymous envelope appeared outside my office. Inside were printed photographs showing Ilara arguing with hospital administrators years earlier. There were copies of complaints signed by parents. Several articles questioned her judgment. No explanation accompanied them. Only one handwritten sentence. People like her never change. I felt sick. Every peaceful memory we'd built suddenly collided with uncertainty. I hated myself for doubting her. But doubt still entered. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I withdrew. She noticed. Of course she did. Distance speaks louder than accusations. 3 days later she asked if we could meet at the riverside park where our relationship had truly begun. The afternoon sunlight reflected across calm water while cyclists passed nearby. She looked at me with heartbreaking honesty. Before I asked a single question, she admitted someone was trying to destroy the life she'd rebuilt. Then she handed me a thick folder she'd carried for years. Inside were official investigation reports. Witness statements. Letters from grateful families. Court documents proving she had been completely cleared. Even more shocking was the final document. Vanessa had knowingly hidden information during the investigation to protect herself from disciplinary action. Although the truth eventually surfaced, public attention had already disappeared. The correction never traveled as far as the accusation. Elara quietly admitted she'd stopped defending herself years ago because constantly proving your innocence slowly steals your soul. She simply chose to live differently. Helping others became her answer. Not revenge. Not anger. Service. Looking through those papers, I felt something heavier than guilt. I felt disappointment in myself. I had promised I'd never judge her. Yet anonymous photographs had nearly convinced me to abandon the woman who once climbed into dangerous mud to save a stranger's child without hesitation. I apologized through tears I hadn't expected. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked across the river and admitted trust wasn't broken in one dramatic moment. It cracked through tiny hesitations. She understood my fear because betrayal changes people. But understanding didn't erase pain. For several weeks we gave each other space. Those became the loneliest afternoons I'd experienced since losing my fiancé. Work no longer distracted me. Coffee tasted empty again. Every street reminded me of someone who had shown me kindness I almost threw away. Then another unexpected call changed everything. The little boy she had rescued months earlier had organized a community celebration. His family wanted to honor the woman who had saved him. Nearly everyone from the neighborhood attended. Teachers. Firefighters. Parents. Children. One after another, people stood before the crowd sharing stories about Elara. An elderly veteran described how she'd secretly repaired his wheelchair after learning insurance refused coverage. A single mother revealed Elara had delivered groceries every weekend while her daughter recovered from surgery. Former patients spoke about the confidence she'd restored after devastating injuries. None of these people knew one another. Yet every story carried the same message. Whenever someone needed help, Elara quietly appeared. Never asking for recognition. Never expecting repayment. Watching those families embrace her, I finally understood something that documents alone could never prove. Character isn't built by one dramatic moment. It's revealed through thousands of ordinary choices nobody sees. When the ceremony ended, I walked toward her. She looked surprised. Perhaps uncertain. I admitted I had spent months admiring the woman who rescued one child while overlooking the far greater miracle. Every single day she rescued hope inside people who believed they had none left. I asked whether forgiveness was still possible. She smiled sadly. Then she reminded me that second chances only matter when they change who we become. That afternoon we didn't erase the hurt. We began rebuilding trust honestly. Brick by brick. Conversation by conversation. Month after month. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was patient. We learned that love survives not because perfect people find one another, but because imperfect people refuse to stop choosing one another after disappointment. A year later we returned to the same restaurant overlooking the river. The manager immediately recognized us. He laughed while remembering the unforgettable blind date that had left muddy footprints across his polished floor. This time Elara arrived wearing a simple blue dress. Her hands were clean. Her smile brighter than sunshine dancing across the water. Before dessert arrived, I reached into my jacket. Not with fear. Not with uncertainty. Only gratitude. The ring I offered represented far more than marriage. It represented the man I had become because one extraordinary woman refused to let bitterness define her life. She accepted with tears streaming down her face. Nearby diners applauded without even knowing our story. Perhaps they simply recognized joy when they saw it. Or perhaps kindness has a way of making strangers feel connected. Years later, whenever people ask how we met, they expect a charming romantic comedy. Instead, I tell them about the afternoon I almost walked away from the greatest blessing of my life because I judged someone's appearance before learning their heart. Every single time I finish that story, someone grows quiet. Someone remembers a person they misunderstood. Someone decides to call a family member they haven't forgiven. Someone chooses compassion over assumption. And every time that happens, I realize our first date never truly ended. Its lesson simply continues traveling from one heart to another. Speech balloon special request: before the story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in this situation? If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more meaningful and inspiring stories. Your support encourages us to keep creating stories that touch hearts around the world. Life has an extraordinary way of hiding its greatest gifts beneath the least expected circumstances. The people who appear messy may have been fighting invisible battles for someone else's sake. The hearts we are quickest to judge may carry the deepest compassion. Love grows strongest when it is rooted in understanding instead of appearances, forgiveness instead of pride, and hope instead of fear. Never let a first impression become the final chapter of someone else's story, because sometimes one sentence, one act of courage, and one second chance can transform an ordinary afternoon into the beginning of a beautiful life.